What else do we have when all appeals to conscience have met with the same answer? October 7th happened, Hamas still exists. Is it cynical, vulgar even, to add to our tactics an appeal to vanity? Is it betrayal to dress such a tactic in the concern for individual legacy and an offer of rescue? Perhaps. But the killing continues, so we cannot be above trying, nor should we give up asking. Is there anything we can say or do that will bring you to speak aloud? This is too far. It must stop. Do you need worse anecdotes? Worse than the stories of men, women, and children murdered? Of the elderly murdered? Of babies murdered? Do you need worse statistics? Worse than the number of deaths, the percentage of civilians, the number of injured, the percentage of civilians, the number of displaced, the percentage of civilians, the homes destroyed, the livelihoods destroyed, the dreams destroyed, the infrastructure turned to dust and rubble, both civil and cultural? Do you need worse descriptions? Worse than what bombs do? What bleeding out looks like? What it means to be trapped under fallen metal and concrete? What it means to not know where all your limbs are? What it means to wait, to die? Do you need worse photos? Worse than the school that used to be there, worse than the clinic that used to be there, worse than the father running as fast as he can, carrying a limp body through the streets, the mother, face drawn to the sky, screaming out the name she gave the little one in her arms, no longer here. Do you need worse photos than the emaciated 10-year-old moments before his death? Do you need worse photos than infants decomposing? Do you need worse videos? Worse than civilians getting sniped? Worse than white flag waving civilians getting sniped? Do you need worse videos than men stripped, lined up, and humiliated? Worse than the casual laughter of soldiers upon executing a 72-year-old? Do you need worse rhetoric? Worse than referring to Palestinians as animals and beasts? Worse than the declaration that there are no innocents within Gaza? Worse than the invoking of Amalek? Worse than, quote, a Nakba that will overshadow the Nakba of 48. Worse than, quote, destruction like what happened in Dresden and Hiroshima. Worse than, quote, no electricity, no food, no fuel, everything is closed. Worse than, quote, we will eliminate everything. Worse than, quote, Gaza should be left as a monument like Sodom. Worse than, quote, erase Gaza. Are there any words from any leader out loud in the open that you would deem acceptable as evidence for a trial? Are there any examples? Any? If so, how bad do they need to be? And how many more do you require? What about healthcare workers? Rescue workers? Aid workers? Journalists and their families? Do you really need more evidence? Do you really need worse Worse than engineered famine, a violation so stark that even the United States did not predict it. A stage of barbarism so naked that an ally already complicit through the supply of weapons and official blessing finds itself hatching schemes to get in food aid. I know, tragic. But October 7th happened, and Hamas still exists. It doesn't matter that under international law there is no justification for crimes against humanity, that if October 7th had been 100 times worse, 200 times worse, it still would not justify a single war crime. All that matters is whether or not you cling to the answer, whether or not you can stomach saying the words one more time. October 7th happened, Hamas still exists. Ahmed al-Naouk lost 21 members of his family. October 7th happened, Hamas still exists. Kitam Atala Elian lost 42 members of her family. October 7th happened, Hamas still exists. Hind Rajab was 6 years old, trapped in a car with her cousin family, who were all killed in front of her. She was killed later as she waited to be rescued. The charred remains of the two men and the ambulance sent to rescue her were found just within sight of the bullet-riddled car. I know. Tragic. But October 7th happened, and Hamas still exists. I get it. You don't need worse. You just need the words. October 7th happened, Hamas still exists. October 7th happened, Hamas still exists. All accountability, all responsibility, all guilt, all shame, it's all washed away. Even the desire for justice, washed away. For in all the citing of October 7th I have heard, not one has called for an independent criminal investigation into the events of that day to thoroughly fact find and document each and all cases of terrorism so the perpetrators of that terrorism, as well as those who gave the orders, may be tried and brought to justice. The victims of October 7th certainly deserve this. However, those who defend the slaughter in Gaza and do so in those victims' names, in the hostages' names, do not call for such independent criminal investigations because they know they can neither acknowledge nor endorse any semblance of process, any semblance of transparency, for anything even resembling impartial process, anything that could be held up for the world to see could then be demanded for the crimes committed in October 7th's aftermath. That's why it's important to not only say October 7th happened, but to follow with Hamas still exists. By designating Hamas's destruction as the goal, any violence in the service of that mission is recognized to be both necessary and committed with the purest of intentions, thereby pardoned before the act of violence itself is even taken. Forever, or as long as Hamas still exists. October 7th happened. Hamas still exists. Our side is justified. Our side has the purest of intentions. It really is that easy. Just say the words and you too can smugly feign ignorance of this most elementary truth. That in a moment like this, there can be no defense, none whatsoever, based upon intention. Claiming good intentions is too convenient. Even most vile of character can avail of it. When weapons of war are put to their use, there are no intentions to consider. There are only anticipated consequences. For example, To make hospitals inoperable and to then drop bombs on nearby residential areas is to guarantee that children will be brought in need of surgeries and amputations. Surgeries and amputations that will have to be done without anesthesia. Such an operation without anesthesia can only be described as torture. More specifically, medical torture. Can you imagine a 6-year-old girl having to endure this? Can you close your eyes and imagine it? If you cannot, there are videos you can watch. These things, these horrible things, are anticipated consequences. They are easily foreseeable. Are they not enough? Is this example on its own not enough? Is setting the table for the medical torture of children not enough? When actions like this are taken and then so casually dismissed, it is hard for the mind not to drift into the past. Should we go to that place? Should we make those comparisons? Should we stack these comparisons one after another? Isn't that what you were counting on? For those who are waiting for me to get here, for those who can hardly hide their smiles as they prepare to howl anti-Semitism at even the hint of such a comparison, or the mere use of words like massacre or mass murder or genocide. The irony is instructive. Because you are correct. This is not Nazi Germany. This is not the Holocaust. It is its own evil. And it warrants a name. All its own. The term will be for the Palestinians to create the Palestinian poet, the Palestinian doctor, the Palestinian mother, the Palestinian orphan. But always remember, it was you who commissioned it. It was you who demanded a separate word be given to history. A term that will attach itself not only to those inside of Israel who gave the orders, who carried out the orders, who cheered on the orders, who came out to blockade, who laughed and mocked the dead, who knowingly spread the lies, who called for the siege and the slaughter to be intensified, but also to those who pledged their voices outside of Israel to learn a melody and sing over the rhythm of bullets and bombs. From the propagandists to the politicians, from the mercenaries to the true believers, those who defended undetoured as the numbers went higher, those who debated without wavering as the accounts grew more horrific, those who knew in their hearts to not call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. Day after day, week after week, month after month was to insist there must be more killing and more and more and worse and more. The same enablers rationing their influence to the censuring and smearing of anyone daring to call the deaths anything greater than regrettable. You must know it is your own name you sink to the bottom. Your place waiting in an exhibit somewhere along the walls of a museum to be built from shattered bones and concrete, and the word you made inevitable. All because it wasn't enough. You needed worse. You needed worse. You needed something worth more than the lives of Palestinians. And now you will have that. You can tell yourself that every drop of blood is justified, no matter the scale, no matter how fiendish the killing gets. You can dismiss every soul lost as nothing less than necessary. But you cannot dismiss what is coming. A name is coming. A word for the survivors, for the perished, for the perpetrators, for the accomplices, and for those who emphasize its special relevance with their denial. But you know very well there can be no denial. There can only be a disguise to wear hereafter. How much time is left before your obituary is eclipsed by an asterisk? Then again, there are still lives to be saved. There is still time for you to speak aloud. This is too far. It must stop. If protests and pressure and international outrage are but an annoyance, if the accumulation of reporting elicits but a yawn, if you will not bend for the sake of Palestinians, if you will not act to save the lives of Palestinians, will you not act to save yourself? Even if you do not mean it, even if it pains you to utter it, if you can pretend well enough, if the weight of your name counts enough to help in the preemption of what we can all see, where all of this is leading, then maybe. But if you wait and leave this moment's end to the whims of vengeance, to the depths of the fog and all the little opportunities that ethnic cleansing offers, what happens to your remembrance will be of your own doing. The word is already on the way. Like Srebrenica, like Rwanda, like East Timor, like Cambodia, like the Nakba. When someone voices it, people will know. And they will know about you. October 7th happened. Hamas still exists. These statements are no less true than when you started proclaiming them. But how much time is left for you to also proclaim, this is too far. It must stop. For now, the word is Gaza.